At the moment, we're dealing with financial miracles, and over the years I've seen quite a few, but perhaps none more astounding than the story I'm going to tell you today. Now, over a lot of years, there were plenty of times I would gather for prayer with my staff, because we would pray every day, but then we'd have prayer retreats. And then we'd call for special seasons of prayer or days of prayer if there was a big need. And I remember an occasion we called a prayer meeting here at my house. Everybody gathered. So there were probably 10 people, 5 men and women, a handful of couples anyway, my senior leaders. And we poured the whole morning into prayer. And amongst other things, we had financial needs, cash flow needs in the ministry, opportunities that we couldn't yet fund, that kind of thing. And it was on our mind, but other things were on our mind too. And what I haven't told you is that at the time there was something very, very big that we weren't, a big financial problem that we weren't even thinking of in that meeting. In the meeting we were dealing with finance more generally and some other things. But as the meeting went on, and this in itself is a bit unusual, the Lord made something very clear, not so much to me, but to my staff, and in particular to Tony Ponicky, who had a word on this. And at some point, about 10:30 in the morning, he brought this word. And his word was to the meeting, to the others, that the Lord had called me to be an apostle and he'd given me authority, and they were meant to respect this authority, especially when it came to real decision making over the financial direction of the ministry, and that I was to be trusted. Now, this might not be a recipe for most ministries, but the ministry was unique, and there was a unique calling upon me, and I wasn't saying this. And this wasn't the first time that some other leader had expressed, hearing the heart of God on this, that he wanted my team of leaders to really trust me and to walk with me. And on this particular occasion, it was that he wanted them to take any sense of their controlling of the ministry and of me and give me freedom to really take the ministry in the direction it needed to go, especially with financial decisions. Now, I'm not a controlling person, and I'm always consulting. So this was more a matter of dealing with the hearts of other people, not me. But nevertheless, this led the prayer meeting as a whole, everybody to be praying into this, and around the room, the others, in particular the senior men, really gave their hearts to the Lord, and before the Lord declared that they would not be controlling and that they would release to me the genuine authority to lead our ministry. And they asked the Lord, it led into prayer, where they're asking the Lord to give me power, to give me authority, particularly over finance. And by about noon of that day, it was very, very clear what that was all about. And I'm not sure I've explained it very well, but that's the kind of thing. Well, anyway, come time to end a whole half day of prayer, and these guys said to me, they said, "John, seeing you have apostolic authority, there's a problem we have that maybe you ought to be the one that addresses it." And here was the problem. We had a fleet of cars. Now, they weren't mine personally. I didn't have one. But there were 6 of these cars in the ministry. One of them, maybe 2, belonged to the ministry itself or the companies. But the others were privately held, but they weren't owned, they were leased. All of these cars, for quite a few years, numbers of us had been leasing cars because it was so much cheaper than to buy them. You could get these special deals where you'd take a new car, keep it for just 9 months, pay such a minimal monthly payment for it, have the free use of it, but when 9 months was up, you would hand the car back and take another one. The costs were very low, and you would keep changing over to a new car without deposits, without big monthly payments, and we'd done this successfully. Times and seasons change, and there were times when this was a very easy way for charities to operate. And in years past, I'd done it myself, but at this time, there were 6 of those cars that pastors had or our workers had, and there were company arrangements. But here's what had happened. We had struck the biggest snag because we had just then got to the 9-month period where those cars had to be handed back in, except that the handing back in wasn't totally automatic. It was actually based on market value. And in the past, the market value of those cars was always a great deal more than what was owed. But this particular year, something had changed and changed very badly. That what had happened was that just a few months before, the company that manufactured those cars, in fact it was Ford, Ford Australia, had brought out a brand new model. And that model was now on the market, but it meant that Ford dealers everywhere still had large numbers of the old model, the same one that we had. And so the Ford factory to make or Ford company to make all this work properly, as they do and as is their right, they had dropped the price, seriously dropped the price of the run-out models. And the situation now was that anybody could go to a Ford dealer and buy a brand new car, unused, manufactured 6 months or 9 months later, and drive away with this brand new, newly manufactured car for a lot less money than was owed on the 6 cars that we had. The result was that 4 or 5 of my staff members, plus the company car, we were looking at serious losses, very, very large losses on these cars. The cars were unmarketable, that you could sell them, but only with a huge loss. And, the market was flooded, basically. It was flooded with brand new cars of exactly the same kind for a lot less money. And it was one of these no-win situations. There was really nothing you could do without losing a heap of money. Nobody especially wanted them. And so here it was, the fellow said to me, "John, we need your prayer on this one. We need a miracle. We need some kind of outcome, or, every one of us is losing a heap of money here." Because you couldn't keep the cars either. The lease deal was they had to go back with huge losses. And so I took this matter up in prayer, and it was the last matter we dealt with of the day, and I sought the Lord. And took this from a position of authority. The Lord had given me authority over finance. And I don't remember exactly what I said, but I remember commanding outcomes, declaring these cars will sell, declaring a buyer will come, or buyers will come and buy these cars. We will sell them for what is owed. And I made these declarations into the spirit realm. I thanked the Lord. He had provisions for their sale. He had people who would buy them. They'd be sold for what was owed. These cars would be taken off the hands of these various people who had them. And I put all of this declaration into the spirit realm. These cars will sell, and they'll sell for that price. In less than a day or two, this was already Friday. In less than a day or two, a motor dealer from up north contacted us, wanted to take all 6 cars, agreed to buy all 6, agreed to buy all 6 for the full price that was owed upon them. And a truck, one of these big transport trucks that carries cars, turned up after the weekend. All 6 cars were put on the same truck. We were given the payment, and the truck with the cars disappeared down the road. This is not just a relief. This is an astounding miracle. Thank God for cars. We all need them. I keep a few models. This one I was given last Christmas by one of my sons. Now, this is nothing like the cars that we had. They were luxury. They were sports rig cars. They were one of Australia's finest sedans, but with complete sports packs on them. The really popular ones. They're the ones that kind of thing works on. All 6 of them, 6 different colours. They all went on that truck and down the road. But the deal there is that it was a case of exercising authority. Now, all Christians have authority. All Christians do. Some Christians are given more. And it's as we walk with the Lord and seek His face and seek to grow in grace, as we're prayerful, of course our authority grows. The more time you spend in prayer, the more your authority in prayer will grow. All Christians have authority to some degree to speak into the spirit realm, to speak over circumstances, to forbid things, to permit things, to command things. And every one of us needs to learn how to do that. You might never be in a position where you've got to take authority over something so serious that affects the lives of so many other people financially. You might. But certainly there are matters in your own life from time to time that a little authority exercised over financial matters will do no harm. And you can call upon the Lord, to appoint angels to bring certain blessings and to put certain things in place. And I know on days when I've done that. I remember one day in Melbourne, I just felt led to ask the Lord to command an angel to put a financial blessing for me in place that day. And sure enough, by the time I got to the Melbourne airport that day to fly home, that financial blessing was right there in the airport. Here's a whole area that's unexplored by many people. But I think the key lesson here is that there are many things that need more than prayer. And I've touched on this with healing issues too. The way we speak is very important. There are also areas of prayer and faith and victories that we need where we must speak commands in the Lord's name. And it would be good for every one of us to explore all the more just how to believe that the authority of Christ rests upon you and to be able to speak in his name and to expect your words to be obeyed, your commands to be fulfilled.